The Suspect is a film noir from 1944. Charles Laughton plays a shopkeeper who's stuck in an unhappy marriage, and he finds himself coasting through life. Things get better after he hires a stenographer, played by Ella Raines, whom he strikes up a friendship with, and of course, Laughton starts to fall in love with her. Sensing this obvious attraction, Laughton's wife, played by Rosalind Ivan, threatens to reveal the affair to the public and ruin Raines and his reputations. Not too long later, Ivan ends up dead. Both the police and the audience are left to wonder if it was an accident or if Laughton killed her. This is another underrated noir by Robert Siodmak, the director of such masterworks as The Spiral Staircase, Crisscross, and The Killers. I think Siodmak was the best at utilizing shadows. They bring so much character to every frame they're in. This film has plenty of moments that will satisfy any major noir buff. My favorite shot is also the most famous one. Laughton stands at the base of a staircase as an inspector, played by Stanley, describes a nefarious murder to him. I don't know what it is, but every time I think of this movie, this moment instantly comes to mind. Laughton most certainly carries the scene, but the shadows complement his acting choices and make a rather simple action one of the most interesting things in the entire movie. Unlike most of Siodmak's noirs, this one doesn't take place in a contemporary setting. It takes place in the Edwardian era. There were actually quite a few noirs from the 1940s set during the Edwardian era, most famously Gaslight and Hangover Square, but this one has a grimier feel to it. Both Gaslight and Hangover Square have some great sets that look so sleek and extravagant, and I love that aspect to both films, but let's be honest, the Edwardian era wasn't as clean as those films depict it. This film adds filth to the setting and makes it feel like it's actually being lived in. Not only does this add realism, but it also adds to the overall themes of the movie. The dialogue has a timeless quality to it. The lines don't really reflect the way people spoke during this time period, but I think that's a good thing. I'll be the first to admit that sometimes in older Hollywood films, the writers would overdo the vernacular of period pieces, which would always come off as cheesy. Here, there's barely any Edwardian phrases, and honestly, it feels like something that could have been written today. I think that's a big reason why this film is held up so well. It doesn't feel like it's stuck in its time period. It feels like it's trying to tell a compelling story, and it just so happens to take place during a certain time frame. All these great aspects aside, my favorite part of the film is Charles Laughton. If you don't know already, he's my favorite actor of all time, and he gives another stellar performance in this film. Laughton was the master at portraying multi-dimensional characters. From the moment the film starts, Laughton gives the audience a well-fleshed-out character. You get a look into his home life and the strain he's constantly under. There's a falling out between his wife and son, and his son decides to leave the house for good. Laughton plays this opening with great restraint. You can get an idea of what's going on in his head, and how he's trained himself to act a certain way around his callous wife. That is until after an argument where he starts moving his belongings out of her room. With one carefully chosen action, Laughton violently rips his nightshirt out of his wife's hand. It's here we realize that even though Laughton seems like a regular guy, he's hiding the horrors he's capable of. Not only does this make his performance more menacing, but it makes it more interesting too. He's so unsuspecting that when he does something malicious, it's unnerving. It harkens back to the idea that it's always the person you least suspect when it comes to things like this. When Laughton is ominous, it's great, but I also love the moments where he's just a regular person. To most everyone in the community, he's a kind, well-spoken man who seems content with the prospects of his life. However, like most people, he doesn't interact with everyone the same way. When he talks to his neighbor, there's a bit of a pep in his voice, almost as if he's trying to sound happier than he actually is. Whenever he talks to his son, he always conveys a sense of melancholy, almost as if Laughton feels like he's failed his son to a degree. I'd like to clarify that his son is a successful accountant, so obviously he's done all right for himself, but it's clear Laughton feels he's failed his son on an emotional level, like he was never really able to be the parent he fully wanted to be. And of course, when he talks to Ella Raines, he's emotionally vulnerable. Although I do think Laughton's performance is the best in the film, I actually want to spotlight Ella Raines. Why? Well, I think this film showcases her range, because her performance is different from the parts she usually plays. Raines is best known for her roles in film noirs, like Brute Force, The Strange Affair of Uncle Harry, The Web, and Phantom Lady. She usually plays a cunning fatale or a strong-willed woman roped into a murderous plot. Here, she's allowed to explore her more vulnerable side. When she first meets Laughton, she's down on her luck and doesn't know what to do. Her sadness hangs on her body, and sometimes it looks like it's literally dragging her down, but after Laughton shows her some kindness, she starts to transform. Raines presents a lot of great high and lows, and I really do feel her affection for Laughton. She also just has a great smile. Honestly, I never paid much attention to it until I saw this movie. I think it sticks out because of how low she presents herself. Overall, I think she's very delightful, and it's kind of hard to believe this is the same woman that starred in some of my favorite gritty noirs. When I think of Ella Raines, I think of a completely different persona. In my eyes, it's a testament to her abilities as an actress, and it's a shame she wasn't given more diverse roles throughout her career. Ella Raines was born August 6th, 1920. She was studying acting at the University of Washington and was performing in a play when she was discovered by producer-director Howard Hawks. Hawks then signed her as the only contract player for a production company he had started with Charles Boyer, and cast her as one of the leads in Corvette K225. It was released in 1943, and Raines soon found work in a steady stream of films throughout the mid-1940s. From 1943 to 47, she made 13 movies, many many of which are still fondly remembered by classic film fans today. After 1947, her career began to decline. Many say it was due to her starring in a string of critical and commercial failures, but I think there was another factor involved. Raines had always been outspoken about how she would always put her personal life before her career. She cared more about having a family and giving care to her children. In 1947, she married a fighter pilot and had 2 kids with him. From 1948 to 56, she only made 8 movies. She did some television work, but none of it was as substantial as her film roles. Her marriage correlates with the decline of her movie career, so I think when she saw it wasn't really panning out, she decided to focus more on her family. Raines would pass away in 1988. She was 67 years old. She didn't go unappreciated in her day, though. She was awarded 2 stars on the Walk of Fame when she was still alive. I'm glad she was given some recognition because I do think Raines is a severely underrated actress. She's always an eye-catching figure in her movies, and it's a shame there aren't more roles for us to look at, but the few we do have are pretty impressive. So if you want to see one of the best Edwardian noirs, or discover one of the most underrated actresses of all time work alongside one of the greatest actors of all time, then I highly recommend The Suspect.